Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Peter and this is Paul.
Good afternoon. Peter.
We're not the two Ronnies or anything like that, so you're going to forget about that stuff. About 12 or 15 years ago, Paul and I were talking about bees, and I can't remember how the conversation went, but perhaps he was looking for a wintering site for his hives, but the suggestion was made that he put some hives on our Waitui block, which is just off the Lavenham Road there, which is there somewhere. Here. Yep.
Okay, what we're going to do for a start is just give you a rundown on the two blocks where we've got bees on Peter's property before we actually talk about the trial stuff we're involved in. So Peter invited me to have a look at this block here. We drove in through these flat paddocks and I thought, oh, here we go, there's some pretty bare sort of looking flat paddocks. And then actually started to have a second look and had a look around, and there's the block up in here that he's retired and already planted in eucalypts, and he's got tree lucerne there. There's scattered willows around on the farm. But the pride and glory here up behind the Waitui Pa is a lovely block of gorse that's being maintained. And so this gives me a reasonable feed supply on here, and this block over here is citrus, which I didn't actually realise at the time. So when I actually thought about it, well, we've got tree lucerne and gorse that covers the winter and into the early spring. We've got the eucalypts that flower, from time to time. We've got the citrus that comes on in October, and then of course we've got the clover and the different weed species that are on the farm. So this block's actually got the year pretty well covered. We've got a good winter feed, a good spring build up, a little bit of a gap sometimes until the citrus starts flowering, but generally the bees do pretty well there. Beekeepers don't move their bees from paddock to paddock like sheep and beef farmers do. We come into a site and this is what we look at. We look at what is available in the general area, and if we want it to be a permanent site, we've got to cover the full 12 months, and that's already been mentioned today. Okay.
So about 8 years ago, the varroamide arrived, and I noticed suddenly that all the wild honeybee hives that were in the trees around Lake Repanari there, they disappeared, and just about every second tree had a wild hive in it. So I suggested to Paul that he perhaps might like to keep some hives over there on what we call our Braybrook block by Lake Repanari, sort of with the deal being that some hives remain through the summer to pollinate the clover.
Okay, so I went round and we had a look at this block. This is the one we're going to be looking at today. There's a ridge line up here, and these are the two sites actually where the bees are located at the moment. This green thing in the middle here is actually the lake. It's not actually a paddock. And so I went and had a look at this site, and yeah, I wasn't too keen. We've got a lovely patch of willows round the lake. We've got the odd carnaca, we've got pine trees that are neither good to beast nor man or bees, and we've got the clover. So, the willows are going to start flowering in August into September, and then you're talking about November. So there's big gaps. And I think I said to Peter, well, I'm really not too keen. He said, I'll keep that block, and he said, well, I really want you to keep some bees there, and really the two of them are going to go together. So there was a little bit of coercion, and so I tried it, and I normally keep 30 beehives on a site, and what I'd find here, these bees were doing okay. They would go from one crop to the next. These ones, and we originally actually had them in this corner down here, they'd get through the winter all right. The willow would come on, and the queens would start laying with a hiss and a roar, and they'd fill up with willow honey, and then come back in sort of the middle of October, and hello, you think you should be putting a honey box on because they're going to need a bit of room, and you suddenly find, hello, these bees need a feed, whereas the ones over the other side were going okay. So what I would tend to do is probably move 20 to 25 hives out and then go to pollination to do something, and they didn't come back. I think I always kept my end of the bargain and kept a few hives there for Peter. But yeah, I wasn't really keen on that site, and it's been a bit of a problem. It's a lovely sunny location. We've actually since moved the bees over to this corner, which is actually a little bit more sheltered. And so when the Trees for Bees project came up and Linda and Barry were looking for a site, I actually happened to mention to Barry, I said, well, I've got this place here it's got some gaps. In fact, it's got some very, very, very big gaps. And so that's why we're here today, because what we're talking about, and we decided to use this as a trial block. Okay.
So yeah, I was surprised that there was quite a bit of difference between the two blocks. But you know, when I thought about the food sources that were available to the bees, I could see that there were some deficiencies. And I'm no beekeeper, but some of the basics of stockmanship are the same, whether you're talking about bees or bulls, and that's you've got to feed them properly. So the Trees for Bees initiative was starting up, and I'd read some of the articles in the farming papers. I've been planting woodlots in amenity areas for years, and so when Paul suggested, you know, finding areas to plant for Trees for Bees, it was sort of a no-brainer really. And it was about this time that Linda and John McLean entered the scene. John is a farm forestry friend of mine who sort of got very keen on the idea and very quickly introduced me to Linda, who is coming here to start her studies on the sources of pollen, protein and nectar at Eastwood Hill. So initially we fenced off these and planted the two areas. There's one below the road there, and this, which is a really hard, dry sort of a site, and this little fertile triangle here. We planted the below the road site in tree lucernes that Barry and Paul had dug up out of a bank up Otoko Way, and also rosemary and natives. And in the little fertile triangle we planted a lot of hebes and cabbage trees and some Californian lilac and a puri tree. In 2013 we had a severe drought and almost everything on the road strip died apart from the rosemary. And last winter we replanted that area with some container grown tree lucernes. And this summer was sort of also quite dry, but most of the tree lucernes have survived. Since then we've fenced off and planted a small area of camellias, some of which will need replacing, and a wet area that we've just planted earlier this week in flaxes, but we'll also put a few cabbage trees in there as well. And the plan is just to keep on adding little areas as time goes on. There's no sort of end to it, you know, it's just like life, it just keeps on continuing. So hopefully in time we'll have a good range of feed for bees.
Right, which takes us on to why we decided to run the trial that we're running here with the beehives as well. Okay, we're trying to improve the site for bees. Now, one of the problems with working with someone like Linda, these scientists, they actually want to prove things. They actually won't just let you say, well, you know, after 5 years, well, yeah, I'm quite sure my bees are doing better. I'm only have to move 10 out. I'm not having to move 25 away because they haven't got enough feed supply. So she wanted to come up with a system where we could actually prove that over time these plantings have done some good. So that was involved an awful lot of head scratching, and anyway, I sort of came up with this idea. I thought, well, we've got the two properties close together in the same area. We've got one's a good site and one's a poorer site. So why don't we see if we can actually measure a difference in the hives? So this is what we've come up with. These are the trial hives, and there's 5 trial hives on each of these 2 blocks. Peter's done us a nice platforms and fenced a little area off for us because we don't want them getting tipped over. And all these hives, you can actually see they're actually sitting on scales. Now the scales are giving us 3 hourly readings, and the little thing on the top here is a little, we call it a hub, and it interrogates the scales and records the weights from the 5 scales, all linked up with cables, every 3 hours, and then once a day it sends the data off to a satellite, and we can log into the HiveMind database and actually get a nice little graph for each one of these hives on the 2 different sites. So we can see 3 hourly what the hives are actually doing. Now, we actually just go back a wee bit. I missed one little bit out. We decided that, from a beekeeper's point of view, just whether I move hives off a site or not is probably not it's not a really good measure. It's not something we can measure very well. We decided to trial hive weight as the measure. And there's 2 critical times for me as a beekeeper. One is particularly this September-October period when the hives are building up. And beehives they work in a parabolic curve. The numbers. You've got about 10,000 bees in the winter. We want 50 to 60,000 bees in the summer to bring a honey crop in, and then they drop down next winter to 10,000 and so on. It just goes up and down. Now, if with that increase, there's also honey coming into the hive, and the hives should be increasing in weight. So we want to actually look at the increase in weight, particularly in the September-October period, and we want to actually compare it with the other site. Now, it's actually no good trying to compare this season with next season because it might rain for 3 weeks in October, and the bees are going to go backwards anyway. A good year, they're always going to do well. So I actually felt we needed to compare within the same season to get a valid comparison. And so this is what we're doing. We're trialling this HiveMind system, which is a reasonably new system. And John McLean's been helping me, and I thank him for all his support. And he's been gathering the data, which we can put into graphs. I'll show you a bit later on. So we're trying to do 2 things, particularly that spring period. Look at the build-up and the weight increase. And of course, as a beekeeper, in the end of the year, it's not weight increase I sell; it's honey. So how much honey did we produce at the end of the season? And do I have a better result on the lake property than I do on the Lavenham Road property? So this summer, we actually had a good season. We've actually had 2 good summer seasons. Now these hives are a bit wobbly, and those ones are 6 high. I'd already taken a box off in December I wasn't actually going to put any more boxes on because they actually start getting quite tippy. And we have had hives blown over in the wind, and that was as high as I was prepared to take them. And the total weight of those hives at that stage was, I think, just under 200 kg over 190. So we can produce some honey in Gisborne. Okay. This is just a view of the hub that sends off the satellite transmission and records the data. It sits up on top of one of the hives. Okay, and just very quickly, if we just take one weight, and we normally take it at midnight, and put it on a graph. These are the 5 hives, and you can see the honey production. And unfortunately, we actually had a little bit of a gap in September, October, right at the very time we wanted to take one of our critical measurements. It's a fairly new technology, and we had a little breakdown in the system and had to send them all back to Christchurch. But you can see as the weights build up, we've took honey off in December, and then we took the main lot of honey off in January, and then we did another harvest at the end of February. So this is the sort of data we get. So yeah, we're short of time. So I would actually just like to thank Peter very much for having us on his farm and for letting us do this trial work. It's very interesting, and we've still got to see if we can prove the point.
So we've got ongoing planting just to try to target these dearth periods, and hopefully when we get decent information from the hive mind, it'll start to highlight where the death periods are with the hives not doing so well. So we can sort of start targeting that with the information that Linda's been giving us with the plants with the good protein and the pollen and the nectar and that sort of thing. So we're going to be monitoring the clover composition of the pasture. We've got one there. There you are. I'm pretty happy with that. That's a good lot of clover there, and that's taken just in front of those beehives this last summer. So I don't quite know how we can monitor it with taking the seasonal variations out of it, but I'm not like Linda. I'm not a scientist, but I did learn in third form biology the lesson on birds and bees that if you have pollinators, you're going to get pollination. So I'll just sort of stick with that, I think. So I've just got a few thank yous for the assistance that's been given in this project, and that's to Paul and John and Barry for helping with the planting and sourcing of plants, and to the local branch of the National Beekeepers Association for some funding towards that, and to Gillian and the native, the local women's native tree group. That's a mouthful. Yeah, for supplying a lot of the plants. Thank you. And to Beef and Lamb, we got the funding to set up the Hive Mind system here through Beef and Lamb for one of their fit programs. So thank them very much for that, and to Linda for the advice on what trees to plant. Thank you very much. That's us.
The beef and lamb thing, just one more thing, did actually also cover the first year's monitoring. We're hoping to keep this going for about 5 years to actually give the plants time to grow to prove this thing. So if anybody wants to do some funding for ongoing, we pay a monthly fee for the Hive Mind system. If anybody wants to do some sponsoring, we would be happy to talk to them.
Yeah.
Thank you.